Hey guys, and welcome back to GCC. I'm Damon, and today I'll be taking a look at the XFX RX 580 8GB Black Core Edition. Man, it's a long ass name. So what does that mean? The Black Core Edition means that this card out of the box can boost up to 1405 megahertz, but usually it'll set right around 1386. So this card only takes one 8-pin power right there. It does have a dual BIOS switch right next to it, which is really handy. So I'll be comparing it today to the EVGA GTX 1066GB. This is the SC edition, so it's only a single fan. So a while back, I was browsing the Build a PC sales subreddit, and I found this card on eBay selling brand new from Newegg for $165, and I was like, okay, all right. So I picked it up. About a week later, it showed up at my doorstep. If you take this out of the box, slap it in your computer, and start playing some games after you download the drivers, you'll notice that the card sits somewhere around 76 to 80 degrees C, whereas this card with its single fan and the same width cooler, so it's the same, 2-slot design, sits right around 64 degrees C. But after about 2 minutes of Google searching, I found out that you can undervolt. So for 3D Mark Firestrike Extreme, with a GTX 1060 at stock speeds, stock clocks, it got a graphics score of 5959. After an overclock of After an overclock of plus 125 to the core and 800 on the memory, it jumped to 6610, which is pretty good. The RX 580, on the other hand, at stock clocks, got a graphics score of 6666. I didn't think this was the Red Devil edition, but apparently it might be. And after a mild OC of plus 100 core and plus 250 mem, I got to 6846 on graphics in 3D Mark Firestrike Extreme. So stock settings beat the overclocked 1060, but like I said before, that's just a benchmark. It doesn't really do anything, and that's not. It doesn't really show you the overall performance. So take it with a grain of salt. It's just fun. So next up is CS:GO. I ran it at 1080p on the highest settings. Turned off things like VSync, motion blur, the obvious usual settings. And I just want to mention, all these benchmarks were run the same way on both cards, so it's the same. For the GTX 1060, my minimum FPS was 127, the max was 282, average 214. After the overclock, I went up to 152 minimum, 298 max, and 258 average. The RX 580 at stock speeds had an average of 218, so slightly above the stock GTX 1060, and max frame rates of 296 with mins of 139. And after the overclock, went up to a minimum of 164, max of 288, and an average of 233. So the overclocked 580 didn't perform as well as the overclocked 1060, but the minimum frame rates was higher, which is kind of nice. Next up is Deus Ex Mankind Divided. For the GTX 1060 at stock clocks. Next up is Deus Ex Mankind Divided. I ran that again at 1080p with VSync off and the Ultra preset. The GTX 1060 at stock saw a minimum frame rate of 42, a max of 64, and an average of 51. After the overclock, the minimum was only 35 with a max of 72 and an average of 56. So a slight increase there over stock clocks, although a drop in minimum frame rates. The 580 at stock saw a minimum of 43, max of 74, and an average of 55. And after an overclock, min is 45, max is 77, and average is 57. So within margin of error of the stock clocks. So next up is Far Cry Primal. Once again, set to 1080p with VSync off, Ultra preset, and HD textures were set to on. This one did not favor the RX 580 at all. So the 1060 at stock saw minimum frame rates of 55, max of 81, average of 69. And after the overclock, those rose to 60 for the minimum, 90 for the max, and 76 for the average. Whereas even after the overclock on the 580, the mins were only 51, max of 76, and an average of 64. So less than the stock clocks for the 1060. So once again, not all games are optimized for all types of cards. So that could be where that's coming from. Metro Last Light. Let me read this real fast. I ran that 3 runs for all 4. For Metro Last Light across the stock and OC of both cards, I did 3 runs. So 3 runs stock, 3 runs overclocked for both cards. I did a 1080p with very high quality SSAA on, 4x filtering, motion blur off, very high tessellation, VSync off, and PhysX off. So Metro Last Light is one of those ones where you can really like get in there and tinker with some of the nitty-gritty details. The GTX 1060 at stock clocks saw a minimum frame rate of 14, max of 143, average of 54. And after the overclock, the minimum frame rates was 10, max was 147, and the average was 64. So there was an increase in the average and a slightly increase in the max, but we saw a dip in the minimum frame rates there across all 3 runs. The RX 580 at stock speeds saw a minimum frame rate of 16, max of 107, average of 51. Then after the OC, went up to 19 minimum, 101 max, and an average of 53. So this one, yeah, it didn't like the 580 very much. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor with 1080p, VSync off, motion blur off, so general stuff, the Ultra preset. Minimum frame rates on the 1060 were 58, max 153, and average of 93. After the overclock, those went up to 64 minimum, 155 max, and 104 average. So a good jump there in the average frame rate, but not much change in the max frame rate. The RX 580 at stock saw 60 for the minimum, 115 for the max, and 86 average. And after the OC, basically within margin of error. So in Overwatch, there is no benchmark, obviously. So I ran a custom game against bots as Soldier 76 on the map Oasis. So it's just the same map, the same variation of the map on all 8 runs. Math is hard. Nope, 4. Just kidding. I'm dumb. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, Ultra preset, 100% resolution scale, VSync off, you know, all that stuff. So Overwatch for the GTX 1060 saw a minimum frame rate of 85, max of 142, and average of 112. After the overclock, that went up to 94 min, 168 max, and 133 average. So that one benefited quite a bit from the overclock. RX 580 at stock saw 103 minimum, max of 212, and average of 131. So that one already beats the overclock 1060 in everything but average, and by 2 frames, so within margin of error. And then after the overclock, the minimum went up to 106, max of 226, and an average of 146. So Overwatch loved this one quite a bit. Rainbow Six Siege is next. I ran the in-game benchmark for that one as well, 1080p, Ultra preset, VSync off. GTX 1060 saw a minimum of 26, max of 112, average of 87, and the OC saw 36 min, 125 max, 97 average. So a good jump there in performance. And for the 580 at stock, 71 min, so like substantially higher than either 1060 runs. Max of 127, which is on par with the overclocked 1060, and an average of 102, so higher than the overclocked 1060 there as well. After the OC, basically the same results, 70, 129, and 105 respectively. Tomb Raider, I was a dumbass on this one. I had to run this like 8 billion times because I was getting some really weird results, and then I remembered that NVIDIA Hairworks was on this one, so I had to like do the whole spiel of, you know, DDUing and everything, and reselling drivers to retest cards. Anyways, Tomb Raider Ultra preset, Ultimate preset, motion blur off, VSync off, and at 1080p. So GTX 1060 at stock saw min 128, max 186, average of 159. After the overclock, those went up to 146 minimum, 208 max, and 178 average. And then for the 580 at stock, it was 136 minimum, 208 max, and average 170. And with an overclock, that went up to 142 minimum, max 226, and average 185. So overall, across these different games and benchmarks, at stock speeds, this card was about 4.55% faster across the board. That was the average of the difference, you know, the percent difference. And after the overclock, it was 2.86% slower because of games like Metro Last Light, Shadow of Mordor, and Far Cry Primal that just really did not like the 580 at all. So, what are my thoughts? So, I like it. I like this card quite a bit. One of my favorite things about it, and it's not even performance, you know, it doesn't affect performance at all, is the fact that there's no RGB on it, which is nice. I usually have this card running in my Plex server over by my TV, so I don't really want a whole bunch of lights everywhere because, you know, I'm watching TV and that can be distracting. So that's nice. And after the undervolt, so it's the same clock speeds, you get the same performance, just undervolted. The temps dropped like 5 to 8 degrees on average, and that was awesome. So I hovered right around 71 to 72 degrees, whereas this thing stock sits around 64 to 68 depending on the games. So pretty comparable, although this one's definitely cooler. But when overclocked, this guy sits at like 71, and this card got up to like 86 degrees, you know, so I was not comfortable with the overclock. I mean, it was stable. I ran every game the same way, the same overclock. It ran Furmark and everything. It was definitely stable. I played Overwatch overclocked on that card for like 2 hours straight. It was perfectly fine, but it was toasty. It was definitely toasty, and that's inside the Dark Base Pro 900. I think that's what it's called. And you got to think too, that's being compared to a single fan card, whereas this one is a big ass dual fan card, and the 1060 still kills it in the temperature department. So, and especially when you consider the price, it's just not really a contest to me. It's some games favor the Pascal cards over the Polaris cards. And that's fine, you know, that's just how some games are. Some games prefer the Polaris cards. So you get comparable performance, usually better. You know, a lot of times it's about 5 to 10% better than the 1060, 6 gig that is. And I got this card for 165. This card still sells for like 225. And I mean, there's no backplate on this one. And this one comes with the backplate. They both require, you know, the same connector. You know, this is a 6-pin, this is an 8-pin, but most, like mine, are just a 6 plus 2, so it doesn't really matter there. This card looks more premium to me, with all the heat pipes right there and everything, obviously with the back plate. The design is something that people may or may not love. It doesn't bother me at all. So going forward, I would definitely recommend people buy these cards while they're cheap. You know, if you're in the 1080p 60 plus FPS range, the 580 I feel like is fantastic. 1060 is as well. If you can find one on sale for a comparable price to the 580s, you know, there's no reason not to if you prefer NVIDIA or their drivers or whatever. It seems like the 10 series cards are selling out pretty quickly. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said that the 1060s are going to start being out of stock everywhere pretty soon. So they're going to start pushing the 20 series cards. And I don't think that there's anything that can compare. Like, if this is gone, then the whole sub $300 market is owned by AMD, you know, so take that for what it's worth. But if you guys have any comments or concerns about my testing methodology, I'm definitely a newbie about gaming benchmarks and you know, comparing video cards and stuff, but I tried to keep everything as baseline as possible. So I ran the newest driver for this, which is 417.71, I think. Yep. Which released on January 15th of this year. I ran this on Radeon Adrenaline 19.11, which came out on the 24th, so just a few days ago. So both of them are in the latest firmware upgrades, so you know, there's no shenaniganery going on there. So if you like this video, hit like. Please let me know down below what I need to improve on for my testing or for my channel or whatever. So thanks guys, have a good one.